I don't know if that's linked, but that sort of idea of the sort of setting and the sense of place.
Possibly, yeah.
And probably, you know, how you mentioned about the lamp and how like one little thing you can maybe start adding in the sort of senses of what you can see and hear and.
Definitely, you know, using the senses and doing exercises that encourage you to use the senses are really useful. So, you know, if you know, you've got the model of, I'm looking over there because it's over there where we're sitting, but you've got the model of kind of what this would have looked like. Is use that as a discussion point and say, well, what would it have smelt like? And try and get people to think about that. What would it have sounded like? What can you taste? And then you can go on to sort of more vague things like what would you felt like if you were there. And that can be quite interesting to explore.
I suppose, what about sort of character and things as well? Obviously, we don't know the sort of names of people exactly who lived here, but from some of the things that you find, like hairpins, or some of them are quite fancy, quite plain, or beads, or like brooches, some of them are quite fancy. And maybe you can start to guess what the person might have, if you start
been like.
Yeah,
I mean, I think, you know, any object that belonged to someone is a great start to a character, isn't it? Because your first question is, whose is this? You know, whose is this? What did they think about it? Have you got something that you feel the same about? You know, this is a brooch. Who owned this brooch? What did they do with it? Did they lose it? Why is it here? And again, you can just kind of, like you say, fill in the gaps. You don't need much to start a story. I think that's what we keep coming back to, isn't it? You don't need a lot. And actually, it's quite good that you've got a gap, because that lets your imagination come in. If you had it, well, this brooch belonged to such and such, and she lived here, and her husband was this, and you know, that constrains you a little bit. Give someone not very much. Sometimes you can give someone nothing. You just say, just write. And we did that in one of the earlier Magpie sessions, and we went to Shipley Art Gallery, and I just said, pick an object and just write. Don't think about it, just go and just see what comes out. And that was really interesting because there was no constraints at all. Interesting how your imagination works. Sometimes it works in both ways. It works if there's no constraints, but it also works if there's a little bit of a constraint. And quite often it works really well if there's a bit of constraint, because you react to it. It's the prompt of things.
We were talking about creating your own sort of little museum, you know, if you were doing that at school. You know, an object that maybe you think sort of represents or is something very special to you. And, you know, you could maybe keep that sort of secret from everyone else, and they try to work out what that, who that might
be an
belong
interesting
to.
exercise, wouldn't it? Describe something. I mean, there is an exercise that's quite a common writing exercise, is describe something as if you were describing it to an alien.
Right.
So describe something obvious, like a paperclip or a stapler or something, and describe it, because that teaches you to be observant. So as a writer, you need to be really observant, and you need to think of ways to explain things to people and make them see them in a new light. If you think about the best writers, they're kind of, you think, oh, I'd never looked at it that way, and it's really interesting. So there's definitely there's something there, I think, isn't there?